Welcome. So my name is Julie, and tonight we're going to be going over how I use the ESA in home educating, the pros and cons of it, so you can decide if it's good for your family, how to apply for it and get ready for that, as well as discussing the referendum that, well, I guess it's not a referendum yet, but SOS Arizona is trying to stop this expansion of ESA for all. So what you can do to kind of help in that so that the law goes forward. And then also if you have any children with special needs, either suspected or known, a little bit different things that you can do for them. So let's get going here. Bear with me. So I am trying to figure out. There we go. Okay, a little bit about me. Again, my name is Julie. I've been home educating both my children on ESA for 10 years, and I run two of the largest ESA parent support groups on Facebook, and I'm kind of a self-proclaimed ESA know-it-all since the law went into effect in 2011, and that's because it's near and dear to my heart. It's been absolutely life-changing. When we started ESA 10 years ago, we were in a very dark place, and it literally saved our family's lives. My son in particular, he's accomplished more than I even dared dream 10 years ago. And that's all because ESA gave us the means to pay for the therapies and the curriculum that we could tailor specifically to his learning style. So ESA stands for Empowerment Scholarship Account, and that's because it was designed to empower parents to choose the best education for their children. And these are actually not legally called vouchers, and the Arizona Supreme Court ruled that in 2014 because the funds are given to the parents and directed by the parents. So they decide how to spend things, what to spend it on, how much to spend it on. They can change all of that. It goes to the parents, through a like a bank account type thing, but the parents control it ultimately, and it's not given directly to, say, like a private school, like a traditional voucher would be. Okay, the funding is comprised of 90% of the state funding that would otherwise go to the public school if your child attended there. Okay, so it's specifically based on enrollment, and if your child attended that school would receive the funding, but instead you might choose an ESA, so therefore the ESA receives the funding. The average award is going to be about $6,500 to $7,800 annually. Kindergartners will only get around $4,000. That's because Arizona only funds half-day kindergarten. And these amounts did increase a little bit this year, and they'll kick in when that Arizona the state budget goes into effect, which I think is also September 24th. So that's an increase from what ESA awards have been in the past. So really, for homeschoolers, this is going to be dictated by the school that you're zoned in. So smaller schools and smaller districts receive a little bit more per student, and larger schools and larger districts receive a little bit less. And so the funding is tied to that school that your child would have gone to. And that's how they come up with that amount. So since you guys are all homeschoolers, the schools are actually not going to see any change to their bottom line for you existing homeschoolers that opt in, because your child never actually attended their school. So they never had that funding to begin with. And then the other 10% goes back to the Arizona General Fund as a savings to taxpayers. The public schools get to keep federal, local taxes, and about over $650 from state funds for things that are not tied to enrollment numbers. So there's like just base funding that they get regardless, and like federal funding is based on the census, and it doesn't have anything to do with enrollment. So they get that no matter what, regardless. And so it actually increases their remaining per pupil funding, and it lowers their class sizes. And again, this is moot for homeschoolers because they were never there to begin with. So these schools still have those funds. So really opting for an ESA is really no different than open enrollment in the state. Over 50% of K through 8 Maricopa students open enroll in schools like charter schools and public schools that are not their neighborhood zone school. And in Arizona, the funding always follows the student to the school of their choice. And so this would be the same thing. The funding is just attached to the student who's choosing an ESA. It's kind of like its own little charter school. So let's get to the cons of using an ESA when you home educate. So legally, you can no longer be called a homeschooler as defined in Arizona state law. And you wouldn't file a homeschool affidavit anymore either. And then when you sign an ESA contract, it says in there, you're agreeing that you must use a portion of annual ESA funding to provide an education in at least the subjects of reading, grammar, mathematics, social studies, and science. And this can be met with any combination of buying curriculum, paying for tuition, hiring tutors, online learning classes and websites, any one of those things or a combination of those things. And you'll notice that terminology looks a lot like what we sign on the homeschool affidavit, right? And that's really it. That's the limit of the government regulation on home educating with ESA. And really, when you think about it, you know, if you spent your stimulus checks over the last couple of years, or you take advantage of any of those like EVIT or WestMec or Eagle Ridge, if you have students that play high school sports with the local public school, if you plan to take student loans for college or Pell Grants, these are all the same. They all come from the government. They're paid for by the government, and homeschoolers use them all the time. And ESA is the same sort of thing. So additional cons here, like I mentioned, EVIT and WestMec, since those are paid for with public tax dollars, and you know, specifically the educational tax dollars, you can't still get that free if you take an ESA, but that would be double dipping funds. So you would have to pay for that out of your ESA funds if you wanted to continue attending those sorts of things. And it's up to the school if they want to allow it or not. EVIT and WestMec and Eagle Ridge, they're all very familiar with ESA students and already take them. But some individual schools, if you're wanting to sign up for like one class like band or something, sometimes they're a little bit confused. They don't really know, but most will work with you. One area though that can be a little bit tricky is they might not be allowed to play like high school sports at the local school because AIAA doesn't actually define ESA students like they do the homeschool and the private school students. It's kind of a vague gray area. So if that school won a championship, there's a potential it could be challenged, and we don't know what the outcome would be. I do know kids that play high school sports, it's up to the individual high school. You would not be able to join certain organizations like HSLDA or some of the homeschool groups that are very particular to being only an affidavit holding homeschooler. But AFI does allow membership, and you can attend the convention, you know, if you're a home educating ESA family. And ESA high schoolers that are home educating can walk at AFI's graduation, and they have for a few years. If there are, like, sometimes there's particular college scholarships that are, you know, targeted specifically to homeschoolers, you might not qualify for those. And let's see here. And then as far as like administration and being in the program, every single penny that you spend must be reported. And so you have to turn in detailed receipts and invoices. If you're not very good at keeping those receipts and you miss deadlines and don't pay bills, then ESA might not be for you, because you do have to track all of that. Every penny also has to be spent according to their rules, or it might have to be paid back. And so this means you're going to have to know the rules. You'll have to read the parent handbook. And if you're not sure, you need to ask for pre-approval. And I will admit there is a learning curve, and it can feel overwhelming at first, but there's definitely ways to use the ESA funds conservatively and never have to worry about paying anything. Like, for instance, all the AFI convention curriculum, all that stuff. Curriculum's pretty straightforward. We know what that is and stuff. So that wouldn't be unusual, and it would be just fine. But if you have something kind of weird like underwater basket weaving, and you want to buy a whole set of baskets to learn the weaving or something, that might be something you ask pre-approval for. And then this program has also gone through frequent turnover in the administration, and with it, the interpretation of the ESA law. So that's led to some frustration as things change, sometimes a little bit from year to year, sometimes good, sometimes bad. But 2 years ago, they put the State Board of Education in charge of developing administrative rules, and that's in order to create more consistency, so that if the administration changes, they can read the rules and see what the intent of the law was, because the original state law is kind of vague in a lot of areas. The rules just go into a lot more detail to interpret that, and so it has improved in the last few years. And then also with this expansion, the Arizona Department of Education, which is in charge of administering all of this, they get to hire 26 new employees to help with this. And so, like, there's a learning curve for parents, there's also a steep learning curve for the employees, and sometimes you run into misinformation, unfortunately. But that's why I created the parent support groups, so that if something doesn't sound right, you can get on there and ask other parents, and they'll say, oh, no, I don't think so. Maybe you ask again, or ask this person, or no, look in the handbook, blah, blah, blah. So it's doable. Okay, so that was pretty much like the it of the cons. So let's move on to all the pros, because there's a lot. Okay, so first, there's no testing requirements. Not at all. And really, every time I've seen a bill come through the legislature in the last 11 years, when they're trying to add testing, they always they always leave off the home educating ESA students, and they always leave off the special ed ESA students, because they know those two populations kind of school in their own sort of way and don't really, hit all the little, benchmarks that they're trying to look for in that. Whereas the most private schools already test all of their students, so they're just looking for those populations. But at this time, there's no testing requirements for any ESA students. And then this new bill removes the public school requirement that is in the existing program. So it's going to be open to all kindergartners through 12th grade, and as long as they haven't graduated from high school. You can buy any curriculum you want. Here's some examples of popular names. You can mix and match and put together 2 different brands and make your own lesson plan between the 2. You can buy above or below grade level. They're just looking for like red flags. As long as you're not buying like some toddler curriculum for your 10th grader, they're fine. They understand kids learn at different levels. You can try multiple curriculum. So if something isn't working for your kid, you just give it away and you buy something else. This in particular has been really great for my kids. You know, it's given me the freedom to choose curriculum that works for each of my children's individual learning styles, which they couldn't be more different from each other. And that's without the pressure to have to like save the money and just stick with the one I have and just, you know, stick it out and stuff and make us all miserable. And then also you can buy educational subscription boxes, you know, that you get in the mail. And these are a few examples of those. Next, they have this whole general category that they just call educational materials. And, you know, it's kind of basic things that you need for schooling regardless. And so these are some of those items that are on that list that you just go ahead and buy. So like any books that you need or, you know, for your child. You can't buy like, you know, mom self-help books like how to deal with my 10 children and not get any gray hair while homeschooling them all. You can't buy any of those, but you can buy, you know, books to read to your children, books for them to use, how-to books. That includes the audiobooks, magazines, workbooks, coloring books, maps, globes, flashcards, manipulatives, which includes like, you know, shape sorting, figures, like, you know, just like little learning aids. And this also includes like blocks in all the Lego sets, calculators, microscopes and slides, planners, timers, puzzles, and board games, which we've been having a lot of fun with lately. And then, you know, when you buy that science curriculum at the convention, and then you get home and you read the whole supply list and all the other things that you have to buy in order to make that work. Well, you can buy the supplies that are needed for the curriculum or the class that your children are taking. Excuse me. Whether that's recommended or required. These are a few of the examples of things that actual ESA students have been able to purchase, you know, if they were using a curriculum that needed those things. So like the dissection stuff, you know, Bunsen burner, gardening, if you want to do a whole gardening unit, home ec, like a mixer, a grill or something. I've seen homesteading stuff like learning to can and a freeze dryer, Wacom tablet for graphic design, exercise equipment like the free weights or like a stationary bike, outdoor sports equipment, kayaks, golf clubs. A lot of Branches students are have been into robotics and VEX. They can buy that. Musical instruments, 3D printer. All these items can be allowed if you are using a curriculum or a class that says they're recommended or required. They don't want people to just randomly buy them for personal use. They want to make sure that you have a plan for teaching your child to use those. Next, you can use it for tutoring and extracurricular activities. So if you're using a particular individual, they do have to have a certain level of credentials or qualifications. Elective type subjects might need an associate's degree or higher. Somebody who's teaching like an academic core subject would need a bachelor's degree or higher. Or sometimes related credentials is fine too, like a USA gymnastics coach. That would be okay in place of one of those degrees. So you can pay for co-op classes like Branches and Keys and individual and group academic classes. You can pay for all these extracurricular activities like drama, Mozart, CYT, dance, gymnastics, martial arts, swimming, archery, horsemanship, PE lessons or PE groups, music lessons, Arizona Girls Choir, city and club sports, art, cooking lessons, parks and rec classes, a personal trainer, fencing, ice skating. Again, these are all things that ESA students have done. And you can also pay for like a gym membership or like these physical activity facility type memberships, you know, like the trampoline parks for the younger kids or something, or even like EOS or something for your team. And then you can also pay for field trips for the student, like theater tickets. We just got, you know, some Gamage tickets for my kids to see a few shows this year, museums, national parks and such. The tickets are only for the student. The parents have to pay for them themselves, their own ticket, but each of your individual students could pay with their own ESA funds. Also, you can pay for online learning websites like BrainPop and ABC Mouse. You can pay for online private schools and classes, Wilson Hill, Ignite, Veritas, testing fees. I just used my son's funds for a couple AP tests over at the charter school, which was very easy. You can also, like I mentioned before, pay for public school classes and activities as the public school allows. I did hear recently, like EVIT and WestMec, those seem to cost about like $4,000 to $5,000 a year. So you would, you'd use a big chunk of your ESA funds, but you would have a little bit left over to then spend on some other things. And then the really cool thing is the funds roll over. So whatever you don't spend, it just kind of keeps banking to the next year. And you have an additional 4 years to use these leftover funds after your child graduates, or as long as they're still taking undergraduate college classes. And you can also pay for in-state college tuition and textbooks, including dual enrollment. So imagine giving your kids the gift of a college degree without debt, and how that could potentially change the next generation of students, being able to not be saddled with those loans and that debt. And then also this new law will allow all students to purchase computers, printers, and tablets. Okay, so there's a whole nother group, or there's additional things that qualified special education students can pay for. And so I'm going to run that down through that really quick. It would be like educational therapies, paraprofessionals, vocational and life skills training, associated goods and services that are needed for like to help them access equal learning, like adaptive equipment or Braille translation things, sensory tools to be able to stay on task or stay in their seat, log-com device, things like that. They also often qualify for increased funding over the base amount to that $6,500 to $7,800. And they have the opportunity to have extended funding through the year they turn 22 or they graduate, whichever comes first. So if you have a child that's having a harder time, needs a little bit extra time to complete their high school credits, that's fine. They can take all the way through that year they turn 22 if they needed to. And then we will talk about more how to qualify for that special education here at the end. So before I go into the applications, I just wanted to know on the current program, some of you homeschoolers might actually qualify for the current program now. So if your family is active duty military, if you happen to live in a DRF rated school district or a school zone, and your family is low income and would qualify for that free or reduced lunch, for example, this would be like no more than $51,000 annually for a family of 4. That's just an example. If you have a 5 or 6 year old that has never attended, I skipped one. If you have a 3 to 6 year old that's been qualified for special education by the school and has a current MET, IEP, or 504 plan. If you have a 5 or 6 year old that's never attended public school and falls in one of the following categories: child with a deaf or blind parent, live in a DRF rated school or district, child was adopted and was a ward of the court, the child lives within a Native American reservation, or the child is a sibling of a current or previous ESA student. And then older students that are new to homeschooling but attended public school or a charter school last year, either in person or online, they would actually, and they happen to be in any of the categories above, they would also qualify this year as well. And so theoretically, just to explain like the sibling thing, like if you happen to have, say, a special needs 3-year-old who qualified for the special needs preschool and has a MET, okay, they could get ESA and they qualify. And then you happen to have a 5-year-old the big brother that is the sibling of the special needs child, and they've never attended school, that sibling, that 5-year-old sibling, could just go ahead and go in as well. Both of those children could go in. And so that's on the current program. Okay, so let's talk though about the universal ESAs for everybody else that doesn't qualify in the original program. So this law is going to go into effect on September 24th. Okay, but it is retroactive to July 1st. It was put in the law there. And so the students that apply are going to receive retroactive funding all the way back to that July 1st, that first quarter funding. The quarters follow like the school year. So quarter 1 is funded in July, starts and funded in July, quarter 2, October, and then January and April. The Department of Education has stated they're going to begin taking applications in early to mid-August. And the department has said that they have 30 days to process the applications starting on September 24th. I suspect, though, that they will take a look at those applications as they come in and kind of queue them and get them ready to go, but they can't act upon anything until the law is in effect on September 24th. So it's in your best interest to apply as soon as you're able. Once you sign that contract, the accounts realistically will take another 3 to 5 weeks to be funded. You know, ADE says 3 weeks. We've seen it as much as 5 weeks. So really the earliest possible funding might be mid to late October, but realistically you're looking at November. Once you sign that contract, though, you can begin spending like with your personal funds and just keep your detailed receipts, and you can turn those in for reimbursement once your funding hits. And I would suspect, because it's retroactive to July 1st, you might even be able to get reimbursement for receipts all the way up to July 1st, but I haven't confirmed that. That's just a suspicion. So maybe start keeping track of those receipts too, just in case you're able to. Okay, in order to apply, let me catch up with my notes here. Okay, in order to apply, you're going to need your student's birth certificate, and then the applicant parent also has to be listed on that birth certificate. If you're not, then you need to supply some other documentation as to why. And your name also has to match what is on the birth certificate. If you've remarried and you have a different name, then you're going to have to supply documentation as to why the name is different. And then you also need to provide the parent applicant's proof of residency, such as like a driver's license. There's a million different ways you can prove the residency here. And then on the website, which is actually down in the bottom on the corner of the screen there, that's the azed.gov/ESA. That's where you're going to create an account in the name of the parent actually applying. And this is going to be your ESA parent portal that you will eventually like access all the funding, and you can track your applications and stuff like that. And I just got no, I got 10 minutes left, so I'm going to hurry here. Okay, here's additional tips. Add a filter to your email to prevent these important emails from going to your spam, and then make sure you apply as soon as possible to minimize the delay, and apply before September 30th in order to definitely secure that first quarter funding, because September 30th is the end of the quarter. And then if you're looking for more information in general and just want to read more, go on that azed.gov/ESA website, and they have the parent handbook. They have a running list of allowable items, which is kind of fun to browse through. That's not comprehensive, but it just gives you ideas. And then there's a Facebook group called the Arizona ESA Networking Group. That's for prospective parents as well as vendors and existing parents to kind of network together. Okay, let's talk about SOS Arizona. They were formed in 2017, and their number one mission is to severely limit the existing program and to stop all expansion. And so they're collecting signatures to try to stop this expansion before it comes into effect. So you can like and follow this Decline the Sign campaign page. It's facebook.com/ESA for all. If you happen to see signature gatherers while you're out and about, would you please note when and where? If you're able to take a picture of this, one of the signature sheets, that would be great. But please be respectful. Don't interrupt them if they're talking to people already. And go ahead and email that to iloveschoolchoice@gmail.com so that we can kind of track that stuff and maybe send other people there to hold signs. Tell all your friends and family to decline to sign. And then just so you know, if they gather enough signatures by September 24th, this law will be put on hold and it will go to the ballot in 2024, and we don't want that to happen. Okay, let's talk about special needs. Okay, again, these are the items that are particular to kids that qualify for special education. So you'll be able to use those funds for any number of therapies that are targeted towards improving their education. And these are some of the examples. This non-exhausted list there: speech, occupational, neurofeedback, ABA. If you're already using insurance to pay for some of these therapies, you can also use your ESA to pay for those copays. You can hire a paraprofessional, which is really common in the schools, like, you know, for children with autism. But even though you're homeschooling, you can actually use those in the home. And I did for my oldest. So like when I was with the younger sister, I had the para working on like the homework worksheet sort of thing, or keeping them on task. You can take them to the co-op classes, so you're getting your parent credits elsewhere, and the para is with your child in their class. I used to take ours to park day, so when I'm, you know, pushing the little sister on the swing, the para could follow my son around and make sure he was having good social interactions, using his social skills and being safe and stuff like that. So very handy. And then also additional goods and services that might help your child succeed. Currently, like only special needs students can buy like things like computers and tablets if they need it because of their need. But that new law is going to open it up to everyone. Again, I mentioned before, you get increased spending or an increased award depending on the disability category that the public school determines. And so these awards range will start out about $7,500 for, like, you know, the minor issues like a speech and language delay or a specific learning disability. And then they go up really high to the mid-30s if they have significant needs like autism or severe intellectual disability. If you have a 504, that only receives base funding, but you can use it for like therapies and all the other stuff still. And so you must officially be qualified for the ESA under the category of a student with a disability, and that means you have a valid MET, IEP, or 504 plan document from the public school. And this new law will actually provide an alternate plan for qualification with that category, but that's not in place for like another 6 months. And again, if the law doesn't go through, then that doesn't go through either. Okay, in order to get evaluated, just a few acronyms here. The MET stands for Multidisciplinary Evaluation Team. That's also what they call the document that the MET team develops. So it's one and the same. And then the IEP is an individual education plan that has all the goals and the accommodations, but that's only created if the child is going to attend public school. So if you're not intending to enroll, you only need a MET. You don't have to worry about an IEP. And then a 504 plan is just accommodations, and it's usually used for like medical conditions like diabetes or a minor learning challenge like ADHD if the kid just needs to sit at the front of the class. Your neighborhood zoned school is responsible for evaluating you as a homeschooler. And this is no cost to you. It's free and it's paid with the federal IDEA funding. If you have a child that's aged 2 years to 9 months to 5 years, you might get on that school's website and look for keywords like child find or preschool screening. If you can't find that, then you're going to, or if you have a kindergartner to 12th grader, you're going to email the school psychologist and copy the principal and specifically request an evaluation for special education. Here's some tips. Don't mention ESA. Some schools get a little cranky, unfortunately, even though this is your protected right. So things you could say is you're exploring your options, or you would like to know your child's present level of functioning, which are all true things. List the areas of concerns or symptoms that you think are affecting their education or ability to learn. And you could offer to provide therapy notes or a private evaluation if you happen to have that. And then list the days and times you're generally available to meet. So that kind of puts the ball back in their court and makes it easy to set up get the next meeting. The school then has 15 school days to respond. They're closed over the holidays and the summer. That first meeting is probably going to be just a review of existing data, like for a half an hour. They call it the red meeting. And then after you, and during that red meeting, you might sign a consent form, a consent to evaluate. And that starts the clock of 60 calendar days in order to complete the MET after that signed consent form. If the school is stalling on you, you might say, oh, hey, I'll come in and sign the form for you right now so you guys can get started on the evaluation, and sometimes that lights a fire. Just remember, you're an equal part of that MET team, so you need to convey your child's challenges and what's affecting their ability to learn. If you happen to disagree with the evaluation, like you think that's the wrong category they put your kid in, or they said they don't qualify for special education, then submit a written request for an independent educational evaluation at the district's expense. And so this means that you'll be able to then go get a second opinion at any doctor or therapist you choose. And again, it's free, it's paid for with federal funds. The MET team will then reconvene, and then you'll go over new results and determine if a change is warranted. It's not guaranteed though. And then once you have that final MET document in hand, you'll want to submit that to the Department of Education, and they'll send an updated contract with new funding. So I'm to the end. If you need more information here, this is where you can look. And I'm going to try to open it up here for questions.